Hello, I'm Chris Gavin with Eagle Outdoor Skills, partnering with the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin. Thank you so much for joining us today on our virtual field trip, Introduction to Foraging. Foraging is the gathering of wild foods off of a landscape, so we're going to be talking a little bit about gathering wild plants and fungi from here, Festge County Park in Dane County, Wisconsin. A few things to keep in mind when foraging: it's always your personal responsibility to make sure that the plants and fungi that you are harvesting are properly identified, safe to eat, and are harvested in a sustainable manner from property where you have permission or are legally permitted to harvest from. We are going to be covering the basics of foraging. Most of this plant walk, that's what we call it in the business, is going to be strolling through this area here, pointing out different plants and talking about their edible and medicinal uses. But for those of you who are maybe just getting into foraging or are a little bit like, hey, I've never done this before, we're going to kind of start right from the beginning and do like a little bit of a half an hour spiel about how to get into this activity called foraging. So when you're wanting to get into plants, chances are, if you haven't taken like Botany 402, Vascular Flora Wisconsin, a college course, or if you took it 20 years ago, you're going to want to have something like a really good field guide. This is Sam Thayer's Field Guide to Edible Wild Plants of Eastern and Central North America. An internationally known foraging author who happens to live in northern Wisconsin, writes about plants he has experience with. You need this book. Plants as people is a really helpful analogy. Plants are like people. Some of them you have a relationship. Plants are like people. The vast majority of them you're never going to meet or have a whole lot to do with them. Plants are like people. Some of them are attractive to look at. Plants are like people. What you consider attractive to look at is going to be totally different than what someone else considers attractive to look at. Plants are like people. Some of them are toxic, and you might want to keep them at arm's length, right? We live in a very magical place in the upper Midwest. There are only 4 or 5 plants that are going to put you 6 feet under if you have a little nibble on them. Now, there's a lot of plants that'll make you very ill if you eat a salad bowl full of them or a pretty big quantity of them. 4 or 5, I mean, when I first got into foraging, I just sat down with a sketchbook and drew those 4 or 5 plants so that I knew them really well. The fungi people are just like human people too, and there's a little bit more dangerous characters running around in the fungi people kingdom. So if you're dealing with mushrooms, exercise more caution and make sure you've got a positive identification on them. If you want to make sure you've got a real solid positive idea on your mushrooms, you're going to want to be going with a book like this. If you're one to think, oh, it says Mushrooms of the Upper Midwest 2nd edition, it must have every single mushroom in the Upper Midwest in a little tiny pocket guide just like this, it's like, no, probably not. Turkey salad. This plant will send up a basal rosette of fresh, tender young growth that you can harvest in mid-spring or so. When you're targeting greens, you want, in general, to get fresh green growth, like just coming in. It makes my mouth itch just a little bit when I eat it raw. Everybody's gonna be different. Now, I have run into foragers before who are like, oh my god, I love the idea of gathering wild foods, but how do you know something didn't pee on that? You don't. If you suspect that something may have, then wash it off. We're all out here after a heavy rainstorm yesterday. Everything's washed off right now. But the thing is, when you go to the grocery store, there's no guarantee that a deer didn't pee on something that you just got from the farmer's market either. So, make sure you know yourself in terms of where are you on that squeamish scale, and also do a gut check and be honest with yourself. Do you really know that everything you've eaten is completely sterilized? And do you want it completely sterilized either? People ask me, oh, Chris Gavin, what's your favorite wild food? I'm like, elk backstrap. And they're like, dude, I meant plants, okay? And then they think I'm gonna say something like swamp saxifrage flower stalks or some weird exotic thing, but it's wild strawberries. they're like, oh, well, yeah, they're good. Yeah, exactly, they're good, right? I mean, like, there's a reason they've got a reputation. We see a whole bunch of other things on the landscape, like our elm tree here. Now, those seeds that come off of elm trees are edible. A couple things to note, if anyone here was like hoping to gather those like insider notes on morel mushrooms, and there's usually one or two people in almost every class who's like, it's all about the morel mushrooms. So with morel mushrooms, take a meat thermometer into the woods with you, like one with a nice long 5 or 6 inch stem on it. Stick that into the soil. You're going to be looking for 52 to 53 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when those mushrooms are going to start to come out of the ground. So that would explain why they come out and like, you can check this stuff on social media. It's like, oh, they're in Southern Illinois. Oh, they're in Central Illinois. Oh, they're in Northern Illinois. They're almost here, right? On the medicinal side of things, does anyone recognize this plant by chance? Yeah, this is woodland Joe Pye weed. There's lots of different Joe Pye weeds. All of them can be used medicinally for the same, in the same capacity. The root is supposed to be helpful. Another name for this, common name for this plant is gravel weed. And gravel is an older term for stones, like kidney or bladder stones. We have a number of silphiums, and you don't want to harvest the flower stalk off of all of them willy-nilly, because prairie dock and compass plant are a little bit more hard to find, they're not so prone to be weedy. The stalks are actually edible. All you have to do is peel them. It's delicious. Dandelion is a wonderful wild edible. Now, oftentimes, if you've got it growing on your yard and you do any like lawn mowing, you're not going to get these nice big leaves like this. All parts of the dandelion are going to be edible. At least that's what I used to tell people until about 2 weeks ago, when I had some high schoolers grab those fluffy heads and start putting them in their mouth and trying the dandelion version of the cinnamon challenge. And I was like, okay, I mean, you're not going to kill yourself, but you probably shouldn't be putting that fluffy thing into your mouth and going, again, everybody's going to be different in terms of what they find to be like a little too bitter, or maybe even not bitter enough, but just stripping pieces off the leaves. It's a little tedious, but if you get some nice big leaves like this, you can just strip the greens from the mid vein and cut way down on that bitterness if you're throwing it into a salad. Pop those heads off, the yellow flower heads. Batter them like county fair style and deep fry them, and then we have a whole bunch of dipping sauces, some of them wild, some of them like just store-bought barbecue sauce, and we're like dipping all these fried flower heads as a meal, usually on a Sunday evening, into these different dipping sauces. So lots of things you can do with the dandelion. More cool stuff. Awesome. So, does everyone know what this plant is right here? Yarrow, yeah. Scientific names can be useful. Sometimes they can just be like colorful and interesting. The scientific name for this plant is Achilles millefolium. Millefolium means 1,000 leaf because the leaves are divided into like all these like fine feathery leaflets, leading some people to be like, oh, is that a fern? It's not a fern. And Achilles is the genus, and it actually gets its name from the Greek general during the Trojan Wars, according to Greek semi-mythology, kind of hard to say. So the stories go that Achilles used this plant to staunch the bleeding of wounds in his troops. And it can be used to this day in the same exact way. This is one of few plants that's really going to be like an herbal first aid. This is a shagbark hickory tree. Now, the shagbark hickory nuts are not going to be coming down here for a little while. It does no harm to the tree to peel off a little bit of the bark that's already sloughing off. Take this and toast it up, and then you get it into a stock pot, simmer it for like maybe anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour if you got the time. Light simmer, and it's going to infuse that water with a toasted hickory flavor. Mullein, which is that like velvety leaf plant you see growing around, tincture of that's really good for ear infections and swimmer's ear. So yeah, all sorts of kind of medicines and food on the landscape. I'm seeing a whole bunch of blackberry and black raspberry mixed in right here. You will encounter members of the rubus genus, like raspberry, blackberry. You're you're going to encounter those in forests. I'm going to talk about plants at least as we walk back towards the cars, and then if anybody has any questions they want to stick around for afterwards, feel free. Thank you so much for joining us today on our virtual field trip, Introduction to Foraging with the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin. Foraging is something I'm very passionate about, and I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I've got a little bit of a personal background with the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin's field trip program. About 10-15 years ago, I discovered the field trip program, signed up for a whole bunch of really cool field trips, and here I am years later teaching a class.